A billionaire's autistic son was screaming in the restaurant until a waitress did the unthinkable. The restaurant was filled with the usual hum of conversation, the clink of silverware, and the soft sounds of laughter. But within the chatter, there was one sound that stood out, sharp, urgent, and unmistakable. A child's scream. Maya, an experienced waitress at the fancy restaurant, felt her stomach tighten at the sound. It wasn't the kind of scream you could ignore, not a usual tantrum or a playful yell. This was something deeper, more desperate. She looked over at the table where the cries came from. A father, dressed in nice clothes, was with a young boy who was no more than 10. The boy's face was red, his hands gripping the sides of his chair as if he was trying to hold himself together. The father's hands shook a little as he tried to calm him, but the boy's cries only got louder. Maya's heart went out to them. She had seen children act out before, but there was something different about this. The father looked helpless, his attempts to calm his son failing again and again. He gave an apologetic look around the room, but the judgmental stares of the other diners only seemed to make things worse. Maya could see the frustration, the guilt, the shame in the father's eyes. She had to do something. But what? The boy's cries were now constant, cutting through the soft jazz music and the clinking of glasses. Maya couldn't just walk away. She had seen a lot in her years at the restaurant, but this was new. She walked to the table, her heart heavy with sympathy for both of them. She had no idea how to fix this, but she knew she couldn't stand by and do nothing. "Can I get you anything to help him calm down?" she asked gently, her voice soft, but filled with a quiet determination. The father looked up at her, his face pale with embarrassment and exhaustion. "I don't know what to do anymore," he said, his voice strained. Maya glanced at the boy, his face twisted in pain, his voice rising higher. "It's okay," Maya said, her heart aching for the child. "We'll figure this out." Maya could feel the eyes of the other customers on her, but she didn't care. She wasn't just going to stand there and let this family suffer. There had to be something she could do. "Where are you watching from today? Have you ever been in a situation where you felt you had to help, even when you weren't sure how? Let me know in the comments. What happened next may surprise you." Maya stood at the counter, her eyes occasionally looking back to the table where the father and son sat. The boy's cries had softened a little, but there was still a tension in the air that couldn't be ignored. Maya continued to serve her customers, but her thoughts kept drifting back to them. She had been a waitress long enough to know when someone was struggling, and this family's situation was different. The father was doing his best, but it wasn't enough. It was as if nothing he did could reach his son, and it was breaking him. Maya had seen many parents struggle, but there was something about this father's helplessness that stuck with her. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated with the boy. He looked exhausted, as if he had been fighting this battle for years. Maya could see it in his eyes. He was afraid. Afraid that he might lose his patience, afraid that no one would understand. Afraid that he was failing his child. The boy had quieted down a bit, but his hands still gripped the sides of his chair. His face was flushed, tears still streaming down his cheeks, his body tense. Maya's heart ached for him. She could tell that the boy didn't want to be like this. He wasn't acting out for attention. There was something deeper, something that only a few people could understand. She had learned a bit about autism from past experiences. Kids who had sensory overloads, who couldn't control their reactions to the world around them, who were misunderstood by many. Maya wasn't sure if this boy was autistic, but she knew that the screams weren't out of meanness or defiance. The boy was in pain, and it was a pain that only he truly understood. Maya looked back at the father, who was now wiping his forehead, his hands resting on the table as he stared down at the menu in front of him. Though he wasn't really looking at it, he was just trying to keep it together, as any parent would. He hadn't noticed that the other diners were beginning to glance over, their discomfort growing with the rising tension. Maya knew that some customers might be whispering under their breath, judging the situation, but she didn't care. Her focus was entirely on this family. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. The father's head snapped up when she approached. There was a flicker of hope in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by embarrassment. He opened his mouth to apologize, but Maya stopped him before he could say anything. "You're doing your best," she said softly, her voice firm yet reassuring. "You're not alone in this." He blinked at her as if surprised by her understanding. "I'm trying," he muttered, his voice thick with emotion. "But nothing works. Nothing helps." Maya looked down at the boy. "Sometimes all we need is a little help finding something that works for them. It's not easy, but it's not your fault either." The father's shoulders slumped, and he gave a small, defeated nod. Maya glanced around, noticing the quiet murmur of the room. She felt the weight of the eyes on her, but she couldn't let that stop her. This was bigger than the discomfort of a few customers. The boy's cry reached a higher pitch again, and Maya's mind raced. What can I do to help him? She needed something. Some way to connect with this child, who was so clearly struggling. She scanned the table and then saw something small on the far corner, an old, colorful fidget toy. Maya didn't know if it would work, but she had seen how such simple objects could help children regain some control in overwhelming situations. She hesitated for just a moment. The father was watching her, unsure of what to expect, but Maya didn't have time to second-guess herself. She gently reached for the toy, picked it up, and slowly approached the boy. She knelt down to his level, offering the small sensory object to him. "Hey there," she said in a calm, soothing voice. "I think this might help. It's a little toy that can keep your hands busy. Would you like to try it?" For a brief moment, the boy's eyes flickered with curiosity, though his face remained tense. He didn't reach for it right away, but he didn't scream either. The father's hand rested on his shoulder, a quiet encouragement that this was okay. Maya held the toy gently, giving the boy time. The air in the room was thick with anticipation. Would it work? Would this small gesture be enough to calm him down? Finally, the boy's hand twitched, and then slowly he reached for the fidget toy, his small fingers curling around it. He turned it over in his hand, the motion smooth and repetitive. The tension in his body slowly started to melt away. His breathing evened out, and for the first time in what seemed like hours, the scream stopped. The father's face softened with relief, his eyes glistening. He glanced up at Maya, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," he said, his words thick with gratitude. "I don't know what to say. This has never happened before." Maya smiled softly. Sometimes all it takes is finding something small that makes a big difference. As the boy continued to spin the toy in his hands, the father let out a breath he had been holding for far too long. The room, which had once been filled with tension, now felt calmer. The father placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder, and they shared a quiet moment of connection. Maya stepped back, but letting the father have his space. She felt a warmth in her chest, an unexpected but deeply satisfying sense of accomplishment. She hadn't solved everything, but she had helped in a way that mattered, and for that moment, that was enough. As the boy calmed down, Maya felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She had done something real today, something that made a difference. Now it was time to let them be. But Maya couldn't shake the thought. Sometimes just showing up for someone, even in the smallest way, was enough to change the course of a day, or even a life. The calm that followed was fragile, like a delicate thread keeping everything from falling apart. The boy, now focused on the fidget toy in his hands, seemed calmer, but Maya could see the underlying tension still present in the father's eyes. There was relief in his expression, but there was also a lingering sadness, a deep tiredness that told her this was just one small victory in a much bigger battle. As the minutes ticked by, the father slowly regained his composure, but Maya could tell he was far from at ease. The boy, while quieter, wasn't truly relaxed. His body still trembled slightly, and every so often his eyes darted around the room, as if he were still overwhelmed by everything. The restaurant, with its clinking dishes and conversations, must have felt like a chaotic storm to him, and the fidget toy, while helpful, could only do so much. Maya watched them both carefully, a knot tightening in her chest. The father had looked so defeated earlier, his shoulders hunched with the weight of responsibility. Now he sat across from his son, a weak smile tugging at the corners of his lips, but his eyes were distant, like he was already preparing for the next battle. Maya knew that this moment of calm wasn't the end. It was just a brief rest. The boy shifted in his seat, and his grip on the fidget toy tightened, the spinning slowing down as his attention wandered. A low sound, a mix between a grunt and a whimper, escaped from him, and Maya's heart sank. She had seen this before, the signs of sensory overload. No matter how small the trigger, it could send him spiraling again. The father's face hardened, his earlier relief quickly replaced by that same familiar worry. He looked at Maya, his eyes pleading, as if silently asking for help again. Maya didn't need to hear him speak. She had seen the weight of his frustration, the helplessness in his gaze. He didn't know what to do, and neither did she. But that didn't matter. She couldn't just walk away. "I'm sorry," the father whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I never meant for this to happen. I didn't think he's never like this in public." Maya's heart ached. She didn't respond immediately. There were no words to fix this, no quick solution to offer. Instead, she simply nodded, understanding more than he could imagine. "It's not your fault," she said softly, her tone gentle but firm. "You're doing everything you can." The father's face crumpled slightly as he looked back at his son, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and sorrow. I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this. Every day is a struggle, and I don't want him to feel like he's a burden." Maya felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. She could see the toll this had taken on him. There was a quiet desperation in his voice, a longing for normalcy that had likely been out of reach for far too long. And in that moment, Maya understood something deep in her bones. This wasn't just a father dealing with a child's meltdown. This was a parent carrying the weight of a lifetime of uncertainty, of constantly wondering what he was doing wrong, of feeling like he was failing his son. As the boy's cries started to rise again, Maya took a deep breath, stepping closer. She didn't know what more she could do, but she knew that leaving them to struggle alone wasn't an option. "Would you like to try something else?" Maya asked the father, her voice calm but kind. She wasn't sure what she had in mind, but she had to try. Sometimes all it took was a shift, a small change in approach, to help a child like this regain control. The father looked at her, his eyes filled with both doubt and hope. "What do you mean?" he asked. Maya glanced around the restaurant quickly, scanning the surroundings for anything that might help. Her eyes fell on the corner of the room where a large aquarium was tucked away, its soft, bubbling sounds filling the background. The boy had stopped crying for a brief moment, his attention drawn to the flickering movement inside the tank. Maya gently gestured toward the aquarium. "How about we walk over there for a minute? The fish might help calm him down." The father hesitated, glancing at his son. The boy's gaze had already shifted toward the tank, his eyes widening with interest, and Maya saw a flicker of calmness begin to settle in his face. The father, seeing that spark of curiosity in his son, slowly nodded, standing up. "Okay," he said quietly, leading his son by the hand. The boy, still gripping the fidget toy, walked with his father toward the aquarium. Maya watched them move, the room seeming to hold its breath. Would this work? Would this be the small change they needed? As they reached the tank, the boy's eyes focused intently on the fish, the soft flickers of color seeming to soothe him, his breath steadied. And for the first time that night, he stopped squirming. The father stood beside him, his hand resting gently on his son's shoulder, his body relaxing as the child calmed down. Maya watched from a distance, her heart swelling with quiet satisfaction. She hadn't fixed everything, but this was something. A small, peaceful moment in the midst of chaos. And sometimes that's all it takes. As the father looked back at her, his face softened with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to explain what this means." Maya smiled warmly, a sense of peace settling over her. "You don't have to. Sometimes it's just about finding the right thing to focus on." The boy's gaze remained fixed on the aquarium, his breathing steady now, his little hands still gripping the toy, but with a calmness that told Maya that for this moment at least, they had found something that worked. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it was enough to give them both a break. Enough to make the next step a little easier. For now, that was all Maya could offer. But in her heart, she knew that sometimes just being there, offering understanding, a little help and a calm presence, was more than enough to change someone's world, even if only for a short while. As the boy's attention stayed fixed on the aquarium, the tension in the air seemed to ease. The father stood by him, his hand on his son's shoulder, watching as his son's breathing grew steadier. For a brief moment, Maya saw a flicker of relief in the father's eyes, but there was still a sadness in them, a weight that hadn't lifted. He turned to her, his voice barely a whisper. "I feel like I'm always failing him. I don't know how to make him feel, like he's not a burden." Maya's heart ached for him, the exhaustion in his voice, the helplessness. It wasn't just the boy's struggles that were wearing him down, but the constant battle of trying to be enough. Maya could see it. The weight of years of worry, the isolation, the feeling of not knowing how to fix things. "You're doing your best," Maya said softly, her voice steady and kind. "Being here for him, trying different things. That's not failure. That's love." The father's eyes welled up with emotion, but he quickly blinked it away, focusing on his son. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this," he murmured. Maya stood there watching them both. She wanted to do more, but she knew this moment wasn't about grand solutions. It was about being present. In a world that often misunderstood children like the boy, sometimes the biggest gift was simply offering understanding and patience. The boy's grip on the fidget toy loosened as he calmed down, and the father took a deep breath, shoulders relaxing just slightly. It wasn't perfect, but for now it was enough. As the boy's breath evened out and the father gently rubbed his back, Maya stood back, giving them space but feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. The boy, who had been trapped in a whirlwind of frustration and distress just moments ago, was now calm. His wide eyes followed the fish swimming in the aquarium, a peaceful focus that Maya couldn't help but smile at. The father, still standing behind him, looked less tense now, though there was a shadow of worry lingering in his expression. Maya stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. "Sometimes it's the smallest things that make the biggest difference. He'll get through this, and you'll be there for him every step of the way." The father turned to her, his voice thick with gratitude. "I don't know what to say. I've tried everything, but nothing's worked like this." Maya gave him a reassuring smile. "It's not about fixing everything. It's about finding what helps him in that moment. You're doing great." The father nodded, but his eyes were still filled with the same quiet concern. I never wanted him to feel different. I don't want him to feel like he's a burden." Maya's heart softened. "He's not a burden. He's just trying to find his way like anyone else. You're not alone in this." The father's shoulders relaxed just a bit. "Thank you. I've been so afraid of what might come next. Afraid that I'm not enough." Maya's voice was gentle but firm. "You're doing everything you can. That's all anyone can do." For the first time that evening, the father smiled, his eyes lighting up with a flicker of hope. Maya watched them quietly, knowing that they weren't out of the woods yet, but they had made it through the hardest part. The boys' cries had stopped, the tension had eased, and the father had found a small moment of peace. The journey ahead would still be difficult, but for tonight, they had found a way forward. Maya walked, back to her duties, but as she glanced over her shoulder, she realized something. She hadn't just helped them get through the moment. She had reminded them both that they weren't alone, and sometimes that was all anyone needed. The evening continued, but the restaurant felt quieter, calmer after the storm that had passed. Maya moved between the tables, her heart lighter than when she had started her shift. She couldn't stop thinking about the father and son. Their struggle was far from over, but for that moment they had found a little peace. She watched as they slowly finished their meal. The boy still holding the fidget toy, occasionally spinning it, his focus on the gentle motion soothing his anxious mind. His father sat beside him, his hand resting on the boy's shoulder, a silent but powerful reminder that no matter how difficult the road ahead, they would face it together. Maya couldn't help but feel a quiet pride. She hadn't fixed everything for them, but she had been there when they needed it most. She knew it mattered, and for the first time that evening, the father seemed to believe it too. He had looked so lost, so unsure earlier, but now his shoulders were a little less tense, his eyes a little less full of worry. As they stood to leave, the father turned to Maya, a grateful smile on his face. "I don't know how to thank you for what you did tonight," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You helped us in a way I didn't think was possible." Maya smiled softly, her heart warming at the sincerity in his voice. "I didn't do much. You're doing everything right. Sometimes it just takes a little patience and understanding." The father nodded, looking down at his son, who was now more relaxed, his small hand clutching the fidget toy. "It's been a long road, but I'm starting to think maybe we'll be okay after all." Maya felt a sense of peace settle over her, knowing she had been part of that moment, part of that shift in their journey. She watched them walk out of the restaurant, the father's arm around his son's shoulders, and for the first time that evening, the boy's face was calm, peaceful, his expression content. Maya returned to her duties, but she couldn't shake the quiet joy that lingered in her heart. She knew that she hadn't solved their problems, but she had made a difference in a way that counted. Sometimes, all it took was showing up when someone needed you most, offering a little kindness and a reminder that they weren't alone. As the night wound down and the last of the customers left, Maya stood by the door, taking a deep breath. She had witnessed something beautiful today, a simple moment of connection in the midst of chaos. And in her heart, she knew that it wasn't the big moments that mattered most. It was the small ones, the quiet acts of understanding and kindness that truly made the world a better place. With a soft smile, she turned off the lights and locked the door, the day's events playing over in her mind. She had done something meaningful today, and that she thought was enough. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where a small act of kindness made all the difference? Let me know. I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming tales like this.